And we're still learning how to do our new microphones tonight. So just to refresh your memory, when you see green button, that means that you can talk. And we're working on something so there'll be a stop talking button, but I haven't finished that one yet. So the first item on the agenda tonight is an opportunity to hear citizen comments that are not on the agenda. And we do have one speaker, and that's Brandy McCutcheon. And so I'm going to give you no more than 2 minutes. And she's got her children with her, and so wave to them.
Baskin Robbins, so. Good afternoon. My name is Brandy McCutcheon, and I live at 503 Braylon Circle. I am here today to express my disappointment with the vote on 319-2 that was held at last night's County Commissioners meeting. I can tell you without any hesitation that I, a parent, a voter, a resident of the city and the county, was better informed and educated on this issue than most county commissioners, which as you can imagine was a huge disappointment. I want to address my concern with the interlocal agreement that the City of Franklin entered into with Williamson County. I know that you were under the assumption that the FSSD would receive its allocated 8% from the amount you willingly gave back to the county for the next 3 years. I want to point out that Resolution 2018-97 issued by your governing body stated that it was the City of Franklin's intent to include the FSSD in the redistribution of 0.5% sales tax increase, including the City of Franklin's portion. It is my opinion that you would have never approved the interlocal agreement with all Williamson County municipalities had you known that the Franklin Special School District, the heart of Franklin, an entire school district that lies within your borders, would not be receiving a single cent of this money, taxpayer money, that you gave up for the benefit of education in Williamson County. The county is obviously looking out for itself and proved that last night when this resolution failed with a 9-13 vote. While I appreciate the 9 commissioners that voted yes, it was just not enough. The county took our money and ran with no regard to you, BOMA, parents, me, city and county residents who felt misled by mailers that went out pushing this tax increase, and those that voted on it with the notion that the FSSD would be receiving the 8% portion that you gave back to the county. I do realize that the FSSD is its own taxing authority, but we do deserve to be included in this agreement. And the fact that we were overlooked and no one even asked or spoke up on our behalf, that we were an afterthought, is somewhat troubling. I feel our district was forgotten, misled in this process, and I am saddened that old-fashioned greed won out last night over doing the right thing. That the wealthiest county in Tennessee took money that you, BOMA, intended to share with the FSSD, a school district which serves the highest amount of poverty in our county, and kept it all for themselves. I am not sure where we go from here, but I'm hoping that we have all learned something from this process. I know I sure have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So we're going to move right on into the next agenda item, which is item number 19-0174, mobile food vending presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Alderman. We want to present to you some work that's been going on for several months as we followed up on...
Mr. Stuckey?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hit my button.
You're setting a
Can
bad...
we start the whole thing over again? I'm so sorry.
You're setting a bad example for the Alderman.
I apologize. My deepest sympathies. I rarely have problems being heard, but I do want to just give a quick introduction to this item, something we've been working on for several months about how we work with mobile food trucks and mobile food vending in our community. We have had a work group of staff. We've also engaged different vendors, interested folks in this along the way, gathered some input from you, and have done some drafting on a proposed ordinance that we want to walk through some elements with you tonight. We're going to highlight some areas where we think we need a little more direction, and just sort of, this is kind of a check-in, but with some specifics that our team has developed along the way. So Chris Andrews from our planning department will help lead that presentation. He's been part of that team, and Vernon Girth also has worked with that group as well. So Go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you, Eric, and good evening. I do want to point out that Molly and Teresa from our Building and Neighborhood Services Department, Shauna from our Law Department, and Chris from our Planning and Sustainability Department, Paige and Lisa from our Parks Department, and Madison and I have worked over almost the last year in talking to stakeholders and really talking amongst ourselves of trying to put together a framework that will work for our community. What we learned and what we hope to accomplish tonight is to receive some direction on three elements. And if we receive that direction, we believe that we can incorporate them into this draft and bring something back to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and hopefully have adopted. We would also say that based on our experience and outreach to other communities, that we would propose that we have a pilot program for a couple years because to really measure the effectiveness of how it's working. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris. He has a very short presentation, give you a little history of where we came from, how we got here, and the guidance we need from you.
Well, thank you all. Good evening. The process, staff, as Vernon said, we had an internal working group. We were researching other codes of other cities, came up with kind of a draft ordinance to present at a open house in the fall that was open to the public, DFA, the Nashville Food Truck Association. We received comments both in person and then via the website. Those comments that we received are in that draft ordinance highlighted in blue, so those comments are not from staff but from attendees. If we can go to the next slide. So really we have 3 points of discussion that staff feels we need in order to give a kind of a final draft or complete our draft. And that first item is the provision of restrooms. And as it's written in the ordinance now, that vendors would be required to provide access only for employees if that mobile food vehicle is operating for more than 3 hours. Now, that doesn't include a special event or if there are restrooms available on that same parcel for the public. But if they are at a location, we want to make sure that there's somewhere for those employees to use the restroom. And it does mirror the building code. There's some provisions in the building code that require restroom accessibility for employees when they're at a location for more than 3 hours. So that's the first item. Next slide. The second item is about the operation of where we would allow mobile food vending to occur. And as proposed right now, we have it on private property within zoning districts that already permit restaurant uses. And then also at special events and in parks, given permission from our Parks Department. And with that operation on private property, we'd also require them, the mobile food vehicles, to move each night at the end of business. And then the third item, and this was a suggestion from one of the vendors. It was the consideration of a dual vending classification. So a question of, is this a good idea? This is something that Metro Nashville has. They kind of have 2 classifications: a self-contained that just moves every night and goes back to a commissary or a restaurant, and then a semi-permanent option where they'd be able to stay there for a longer period of time. And they have a number of criteria that would have to be met to gain that, whether it's a site plan review, tap fees, that sort of thing. And then we've included in there just some examples of what some of the operations in Nashville look like. We were out as a team, and on Friday, actually, the DRT went out and saw, we pulled up to a gas station and saw one of them. But so the question about the 2 classifications, if that's something that the board wants to entertain, we'd have to add some criteria in there. But again, this is aiming to be a pilot program, so that's always something we can add later. But so yeah, we'd welcome your feedback on that. And the last slide includes the 8 criteria that Nashville has that might be a model. If we can go to the last slide. Nope, next one. those first 8 criteria, and then the consideration of floodplains is also something that we'd want to include as a city. But those first 8 things are what the semi-permanent classification, what the required review is by the city of Nashville. So, any other thoughts, Vernon?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So let's take a step backwards and talk about restrooms. Some of the ordinances that we had did have longer duration operations of mobile food vendors, ensuring that they had access to restrooms, whether they were on the same property, if there was a brick and mortar business there, or within a certain distance. That if somebody was operating for the better part of a day, that there was a place for their employees, not customers, to have access to a restroom. And that was part of the permitting process. And we wanted your feedback on that first of 3 points.
Alderman Berger.
I don't see a problem with that because most of these people would have, are already doing that and also providing for employees. And I will speak from Ward 1. I'm going to speak to some other issues in a minute, but this particular one, most of them will be at buildings and sites and private properties and some of our commercial and company buildings. And so they'll be making arrangements with them to use the restrooms. I don't see that as an issue, but that needs to be in there.
Any other?
Continue on.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Going on to the second point that was brought up, in which we received differencing of opinions or comments on during the open houses that were facilitated, is allowing mobile food vendors on private property within those zoning districts that already allow restaurants, and not having a separation of distance from a mobile food vendor to an existing brick and mortar restaurant. Some ordinances do provide that in other jurisdictions, but after our group discussed that criteria, we believe that there's no requirement for distances between restaurants. So why should there be a distance between a mobile food vendor and a restaurant? And as this ordinance is drafted, we believe that allowing mobile food vendors on private property in the zoning districts that presently allow restaurants is acceptable and recommended.
Alderman Berger.
I've talked to some.
I'm going to let Alderman Blanton. I think I
okay,
did.
sure.
Yeah, she hasn't spoken yet, so.
Okay, I'll bide my time. I can't think of a scenario or an example, but what concerns me about this saying on private property within zoning districts that permit restaurant uses, the pushback that's typical from a brick and mortar is that we have to pay all this overhead, and I get that. I totally understand that. It's a trend. But it's almost like you're setting them up to compete where a restaurant would be allowed. And to me, I can't think of an example of where that might be the opposite, but this seems pigeonholed. I mean, I know you don't want it in a residential area, but to say that you want it where restaurants are allowed, it almost, to me, it feels like we're pitting them against a restaurant. I know that's probably not the intent. Maybe it's the wording that might need to be changed, or maybe I'm just seeing it wrong, but that sounds yuck to me.
Alderman Berger, then I've got Alderman Bransford, then Alderman Peterson.
All right, I'm piggybacking off of Brandy's because that's exactly my point too, but at the same time, that's where they need to be. But I've talked to 2 restaurants in my district, and that it's tough when a truck comes in and then takes their business away. But if another restaurant came in, and in this particular case, let me tell you, Restaurant A now has Restaurant B, C, and D right next to it. So having a truck come in next to them. Then you got A, B, C, D, and E. I don't know how you regulate that. I don't know if that is fair to say, well, you can't go there, and you're saying that you don't see the reason why they wouldn't be. I find that, I'm concerned for my businesses that are in those districts, but at the same time, we live in a very free society still, and we're able to conduct our business in such a manner that the competition is there. And if you have a restaurant A, you have some buildings where all these workers are in offices, and you have restaurant A, B, and C, but they're going to choose the different places. Then a food truck comes, they might like that as well. So there's choices to be made. So maybe what Brandy said, maybe there's some wording that needs to be changed a little bit. We can work on the wording a little bit, but don't have a problem with making sure that they are allowed to go there.
Okay, I've got Alderman Bransford next, and
Thank
followed
you.
by Alderman Peterson, followed by Alderman McClendon.
Thank you very much. Would this negate if I had an office building with parking lots and I will invite a food truck to be on my private property? Would that be okay in this ordinance?
Yes.
If I'm a college campus, and I want food trucks to come to my college campus for the day and leave, that would be okay in this ordinance?
Yes,
Okay.
even if I can, if
Go
I
ahead.
may, even in a residential neighborhood, if an association wanted to have a food truck come on and be on their common area, they could do that
Okay,
too.
great, good. That's what I need
And
to
there's
know.
language in here for that.
Thank you.
Alderman Peterson.
I suppose my question is, whenever it says in zoning districts that permit restaurant uses, I don't think in residential areas, restaurant uses would be approved there or permitted there. And also, even in our general office, or I don't know whether restaurants are approved in just general office or not, but I think so many of our earlier office buildings did not necessarily have restaurants approved. Some of them may have even had restaurants within their building, but their own restaurant. But is that the case normally? I didn't have a chance to look it up.
Yeah, yes, and if the language, we need to, there are areas that you may have observed in this ordinance that we still need to finalize, but with respect to the point you raised, the intent here is that in a residential neighborhood, if an association wants to have a food truck come in on their common area, that they'll be able to do that. And even a private resident that can have that food truck on their private property, perhaps in their driveway, that they could have somebody for a birthday party. That's not the intent, to limit somebody from having a private party on their yard or in their residential neighborhood. As far as non-residential property, the intent is that whether it's an office business park, an industrial park, if somebody wants to have a food truck come for the day or a part of a day, they could do that.
But to follow up, I'm specifically now talking about the residential. Those would not be zoning districts that permit restaurant uses. So, saying it this way doesn't work.
We'll make that clarification. Yeah. We're treating a person at their home that would have a truck on their property, not on public property, not in the street, that they would be able to have a private party. If an association has it on their common area, that they would be able to do that.
Alderman,
Yes,
Alderman-
without the special event permit that we have, yes.
Alderman
Could
I'm
I
sorry,
ask
you-
one
go
final
ahead,
thing?
your last question.
Okay, for the special events, would they have to get a special permit?
For a special event, those are the special event permits that are processed through the city.
Even if it's
Pardon
for
me?
a birthday party?
No, that's not,
Well, let me tell you, think about all the places that we have now that might be Airbnb, and so are they going to be able to have a food truck there? Just say,
All right, we'll take that back to our group. Thank you.
Alderman McClendon?
Couple of thoughts. I think I don't favor any sort of exclusionary district in terms of distance from an existing restaurant, partly because that can change and partly because I don't see how that's an appropriate regulation of what we're talking about here. That's just a competitive advantage or disadvantage. So I'm not interested in a not within so many feet of an existing restaurant type language. Second, I think this entire regulatory regime kind of almost has to start to differentiate between the things that truly can and do move often or all the time versus the semi-permanent, and here's why. I think when it's truly something that comes and goes, then I'm not terribly concerned about somebody having a food truck in their driveway for 3 hours. I don't want to prohibit that, because then you start getting into the question of where does food truck end and catering begin? And lots of caterers show up with what today amounts to a mobile kitchen, you know. So I think we need to maybe think more about how to differentiate the providers, the vendors that do come and go from in a short period of time versus the more semi-permanent, because and if we did that, then it would kind of create a more permissive environment for that food truck to come to the neighborhood party or the birthday party. As it's written, as I understand that it's written, you could only have any of those types of vendors in a zoning district that permits restaurant uses. So that would mean you could not have the food vendor at the birthday party. And I don't know how you know whether it's a food vendor or a caterer, but okay. I don't want to have to figure out which is which. I would rather focus more on, if it's going to be semi-permanent, then I think we need to think about what zoning districts that's permissible in. And if it's going to be something that is truly parked, makes food, leaves, then I'm willing to have that be much more open, because that's the nature of that beast. So I think we're going to have to figure out how to know the difference between those things. And it might just be that we say that an otherwise properly licensed mobile food vendor doesn't, can operate for so many hours consecutively in one place as long as the following conditions are met: private property, et cetera. And then as to the semi-permanent, that's where I think we have to get into if it's not going to be there in a period of time measured only in, say, hours, then I think that might be something we have to think about putting into specific zoning, permissive zoning areas or otherwise, or regulating it a little differently.
Alderman Martin.
I think the only time they ever should be permitted in a residential area is for a special permit or special occasion. Otherwise, I could have a food truck every day to come in my driveway, and then I would have the mayor for lunch every day, and I don't want that.
Are you paying Alderman Martin?
So, anyway, I just think that we have to be really careful about private property in residential areas. I don't have any problem with the parking lots and businesses and where they would go to do that on a daily basis, but in a residential area, absolutely not, or we're going to get into a mess. Okay. And I certainly think they should be permitted for, there's, those wagons that do hot dogs, that they have on the streets in New York. Well, we've got those coming, and they'll be on the back of a truck. So, you know, for a party or something to have those come, that's fine. Or whatever a food truck, whatever amounts to a food truck, whatever that is, I don't know. But I just think we're going to have to be really careful.
Vice Mayor?
Using an example, and hopefully no one, but the example would be the donut thing out at the yeah. How does this affect? I mean, they don't move. It sits there. It's not moved every night.
Man?
Yeah.
Help your neighbor.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So in our research and even in talking, what we found is that the majority of ordinances require mobile food vendors to move when they're not setting up or not taking down or operating. What we've heard is that there may be a desire to have a longer duration, and that's where we found, really from Nashville, that they have this semi-permanent location. And Vicki, could you scroll up to the 8 criteria that's truly semi-permanent? And many of these these criteria here, 1 through 9, are what would be applicable to a semi-permanent location. So they could essentially stay there. Now, some of the illustrations that we showed were from the greater Nashville area, because if they go unregulated as far as moving every day, then more signage props up, maybe outdoor water and propane gas tanks, picnic tables, and such things like that eventually evolve and left unchecked. So that's why when we did our research, came up and decided to bring this forward, and this is the third item that we wanted direction on. If you're inclined to contemplate having semi-permanent locations, that we would look more critically. We really only copied this for the most part from Nashville, of what criteria should be applicable in the city of Franklin to allow it to be a permanent type of, semi-permanent type of location.
Are you done with your presentation?
I am, thank you.
I have a number of people that want to speak on the issue.
Just have a really quick question about, it says not in the floodplain. Are you only talking about that for the semi-permanent ones, not just every day? Because we've said that that's a great place to use some of our areas in the floodplain. Thank you.
Okay,
Well,
quick question.
I've got some questions, but I want those people up here to ask those questions of, because you mentioned some things. I totally agree with Ann's comment about the floodplain. We need to be using the floodplain. And one more thing is the HOA, you know, Margaret, your comment about the residents, I understand what you're talking about there, but at the same time, a food truck's not going to go to a resident. There's no revenue there. There's no revenue there unless you're having a function. And if you got the land and you have it on your own personal property, you might want tiny little donuts in your backyard during a birthday party. And so I wouldn't want to say we shouldn't do that.
Wouldn't want to do what?
Not allow tiny little donuts to come to my grandson's birthday party if I had an acre of land and half an acre of land, and I want that little food truck in my backyard with, you know.
Well, I'm
that's
gonna.
resident. So I want to hear more from the.
You're getting ready to hear
people.
from them.
Okay.
And this is obviously an item that we could spend the entire 2 hours on. So we will bring it back based on what you're telling tonight. But I want to have Mark Mogul, Lynn Freeman, Keith Covington, Landon Lyon. Go ahead and speak. You have 2 minutes each.
Make sure they press
Here or up there?
You're right there. Go ahead.
I'm Mark Mogul. No, go ahead.
My name's Landon Lyon. I'm the president of the Nashville Food Truck Association, and I appreciate the invitation to come up here. Just want to commend this group for the the proactive nature of approaching this issue, and based on various municipalities, I have to say that I feel like y'all are doing it right. As far as to address a concern about setting up in people's driveways, as someone mentioned, trucks aren't going to show up there and sell to the public. I think one provision you could do is just you treat it as a caterer, as you mentioned, and just do it as a single pay event where a family is hosting a birthday party or there's wedding caterings. And in those instances, food trucks are essentially our caterers. And as far as my only concern from what I heard y'all say is that we want to be able to set up at office parks. A lot of people want us to come, and I'm not sure how the zoning is on that. And that's all I have to say. I don't know if you have any questions, if you want.
No, it's fine.
All right, thank you.
It's appropriate.
Lynn Freeman, 1505 Pear Tree Circle in Brentwood, Tennessee, if that's okay.
We gave her permission.
Thank you. That's down the road. One thing that caught my eye, because it looked like it was kind of like you took the itinerant thing and kind of like rewrote it, and you were asking for the application to be notarized, and no other municipality has made us have a notarized and background check kind of a thing for getting an application in for food trucks. And you also put on there the length of time for which the right to do business is desired, which you're really talking about a calendar year. Once again, you know, about the limiting to the mobile food vendors to restaurant zoning, to me, you want to do the opposite. Food trucks, generally speaking, like Landon said, they're there for the lunches, office park lunches, not to compete with a restaurant right there on backyard, but to give people an option. Like, you know, the Williamson County admin building has food trucks every Friday. You didn't know that?
Well, not for long, I guess.
Well, oops.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I don't know how that works. There is a restaurant nearby. And also your wording in Section 2E, you said ice cream trucks may operate on private residentially zoned property for a special occasion. But I don't know why you're saying ice cream trucks, because plenty of parties have grilled cheesery come too. So you don't want to write out grilled cheesery or Cousin's Maine Lobster to come to your graduation party, just saying. You know, as far as like, if you wanted to make a resident get a special permit in order to have a food truck in their yard, I mean, that's just a pain. You don't want to make people jump through that hoop. It's bad enough when you got to do that for a garage sale. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I did have one question for the gentleman from the Nashville.
Sure. Go ahead, Alderman McClendon.
You mentioned one way to differentiate between catering. I'll ask while you walk up. You mentioned that one way to differentiate, for example, or authorize people to have food trucks in their driveway.
Right.
You said single payer, which what I understood you to mean by that was the person throwing the party pays the caterer a flat fee.
Right.
And then the food truck vendor does not take cash from each individual customer.
Right.
Okay, so is that something that you have found to be a feasible way to regulate this?
Right, yeah, the only exception would be if it was at an HOA party.
Right.
And sometimes they'll have like
Right.
a pool opening or close, you know.
But if I wanted to write a regulation that I could have the grilled cheesery come to my driveway
Right.
and tell all my neighbors I'm throwing a party, do you think there's language we could fashion that would allow me to pay that food truck, you know, and that would prevent it from becoming like, because what we're worried about, of course, is a food truck showing up in the same driveway every day
Right.
and becoming a nuisance to the other neighbors.
Yes, yeah, I think it's very feasible to word it as a, you know, a single payer event, as by invitation of the property owner, and not this. I don't think it's a problem that I know you need to head it off with regulations, but I don't think it's something that's going to happen in general, as far as people selling.
Well, there are neighborhoods in Franklin where I could imagine that it could become that problem.
Okay. But I think if you do it by invitation only, single payer, not individual sales, is probably the best way to handle that.
Mr. Covington? How did Mr. Mogul end up last when he was the first one to give me the card? But go ahead.
Save the best for last.
Mark, you want to go ahead?
He serves dessert.
Keith Covington, 113 Fitzgerald Street. I am not a mobile food vendor, but just an advocate for these type businesses. And I'm also a planner and urban designer, so I have visited many places that have done these successfully, and I've also visited some that I wouldn't like to see repeated. But first of all, I just want to commend the city and the city leadership and the staff for tackling this issue. It's certainly one that deserves attention. Another thing I'd like to just reiterate, and I say reiterate because I am sure that the committee that's been working on this for so long has already addressed this, and I'm sure you all know this too, but you know, mobile food vending not only provides choice in food establishment and something different and unique, you know, it is a great way to provide an opportunity for purveyors that maybe don't have the means to do a brick and mortar restaurant to begin with, and it's a great way to start out in the business. And I would say that in some ways it acts like an incubator, and I think there's evidence of that across the nation. So I just want to say that. So with that in mind, just a few comments on the ordinance as it is. Based on my research, thank you for your question, I believe that the GO, the General Office District, does not permit restaurants, so I would suggest that you consider adding that to it. Maybe not Office Residential District, but although I could make an argument for it, at least General Office I think should be considered. I get the conversation about the restrooms, and I understand it's just for employees. I would caution about being overly onerous. Again, another reason for this is to get people into the market, and hopefully they become successful and build something. So if there's too much regulation on them, that could be a problem. And then also, I'm very much in favor of the semi-permanent classification. I think it makes a lot of sense. The one thing I would say about it that I probably have some concern over several of the 8 criteria that Metro uses, just because, again, we're talking about something that almost takes them to a full-blown restaurant. But the most important thing, I think, for any location, not just here, is the issue of the floodplain. And all I want to say about that is we have an awesome park down here that a lot of money has gone into. And one of the great things as a planner and urban designer, activating a park is important. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Mark, you're on.
So I'd like to also commend the staff on all the work they put into this. I think that we want to make sure that in looking at the ordinances that you all have reviewed, whether it be other municipalities, those ordinances, I'm sure that they did not spend as much time as you all have spent in coming up with those. And what they've done is they've adapted them from older ordinances from other municipalities. So you're looking at ordinances and comparing the ones that could be 20 years old. This industry has grown and just exploded. So I think now is the time for Franklin to really get it right and be on the leading edge and maybe come up with some just more progressive thoughts and regulations on how to do this, because this industry is not slowing down, it's getting bigger. So I think that's really, really important. So this interaction that we have, back and forth, and the stakeholders and the community all putting in their thoughts to make sure that these regulations, so a pilot program is great, but that pilot program is going to go to, at some point in time, become a permanent regulation. So let's be forward thinking and not rely on regulations that were done 20 years ago. I'd also say that one of the questions that came up was the cost of entry into owning a mobile food establishment versus going into a brick and mortar. Me personally, I've got over $100,000 invested in my Airstream, and I could have opened up, on Main Street here in a brick and mortar for much less and been in business and saved a lot of money to go that route. So I'm paying almost $200 a square foot for my space that I have in a lease. The other thing is, the last thing I'll say, and I know there's some questions, is that being on the floodplain and with the weather that we had in the last couple of weeks, the Franklin Police came and spoke with me. Their fast water rescue squad came and said, "Are you paying attention to what's going on behind you?" And I said, "Absolutely." I have my security cameras pointed towards the river and towards the catch basin, which I think the engineers must have done a terrific job in planning that, because the water never came. Is at 24 feet. It was still a good 8 feet below the parking lot. But I can move my Airstream. It's been semi-permanent. Y'all know it's been there. I can hook it up and be out of there in less than 10 minutes. So I had a lot of sleepless nights and watching my cameras hour after hour to make sure that the water never came up. But absolutely, I could have been out of there. And so for the floodplain to have this type of, I mean, I can't think of a better business to be in that spot than something that can move, because certainly if you've got, the way that it was explained to me, if that river starts flooding and the flow is at 8 or 10 or 12 miles an hour, the sonic won't be there. The structure might be there, but everything inside won't be there, and there's not anything that can really withstand that flood once that water starts moving. And coming from a hurricane zone, I've seen that. So that's really my thoughts on it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, well, we've got 40 minutes into this issue, and we're on item 1, if I'm not mistaken. Make your request, and then we're moving on.
My request is, before we get back into all this, that you all would come and have a roundtable discussion, sit down with staff in the committee that's doing this. I'd like to be there, actually, because I'm really concerned with the Cool Springs area, that we don't make you all move every day. I think that's impractical, and I don't think that we've got issues with that. I'd like to request that we have a roundtable discussion, a sit-down with your committee and the people who want to come. Thank you.
Okay, we're going on to item 2, which is a follow-up of transition of monthly payment dates for the City of Franklin Employee Pension Plan.
So this item had been brought to you as a concern at our last meeting in some citizen comments, and we wanted to provide some additional background information. Also, the Employee Pension Committee met this past Monday, March 4th, and this item was brought before that group as well, and there was some representation of retirees at that meeting as well. So the memo before you gives a pretty good amount of detail of how we got to where we are, the information that was brought forward, multiple meetings before the Employee Pension Committee, and recommendation they made to the board, and multiple times that the board had this item before you for discussion and direction. That just gives you a sense of how this was portrayed and the elements and options that were advanced before then. And then had staff do an additional review in terms of if you chose to do something, what are your options at this stage? And provided, obviously there are multiple options, but we wanted to highlight really 3 primary options that exist to you today, and how you might want to look at those. And I'll walk through those, and then glad to answer any questions that you might have. But the first option is really to stay the course with what you have done. You're providing the full benefit throughout the year. You've just modified the payment date, and you provided notice. You provided information. You really have followed the proper guidelines that are in your document. That would be your pension documents and what would be required of you. We've had our attorneys look at it and say, did we do anything wrong from a process standpoint? And the answer we have is that you did not. You've done this properly. You've done this openly. You've done this transparently. So you don't have a process issue. You just have a question of what you think is the appropriate way forward. So that's one option, to stay the course for where you are. The second option that we developed here is to really provide an additional payment or a double payment in one of the future months. You'd provide that through the normal process. You just direct the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System, your administrator, to make an additional payment. The cost of a full one-time payment is about $440,000. That is we ran that by our actuary. They gave us a calculation that's approximately about a $40,000 a year cost burden, additional cost burden to the pension fund to take on that additional cost of providing that one-time additional benefit to the 219 approximate retirees as of today. The third option, and obviously you could do a half-month payment, that would cut all those numbers in half. 440,000 becomes 220,000. Annualized cost of 40,000 roughly becomes 20,000. And that ballpark, if you chose to do a half payment, that was brought up, I think, by one of the retirees and one of the discussions we've had. And then the final option was really to try to calculate some sense of damage. Because the example was given that folks may have had to make a late payment or pay some penalty related to a mortgage or other responsibilities they had because of the transition and the longer time between monthly payments than normal, and then what it will be going forward. The best calculation we could come up with, based on a $2,000, I think, mortgage payment and some other types of loans and interest rates that we might assume there, was a cost of somewhere around maybe $100 as a potential direct kind of damage cost. So that would be obviously significantly less amount of impact to the pension fund, but might get an idea of saying, well, they're still getting the base pension throughout the year, but recognize that potential damage of the change in timing. So the one thing I would highlight in conclusion for what I have to say, and I'll see if Christine or Kevin have anything else they want to add, is this is a little more complicated by the fact that from February 2010 on, we started to have employee participants put money into the fund. It was no longer just city money. Up till 2010, it was only direct city contribution that funded the pension fund. From February of 2010 on, there began to be a direct contribution into that same fund by employees. None of those employees are in this benefit group. So depending on how you do this, you want to be careful about how you are assigning a benefit that may be paid for by other participants in the plan that they will never receive. So as we walk through this, we need to really be careful about how we make a contribution if you want to make an additional contribution. I will tell you at the end of the day, you know, I know it's a hardship and we're sorry for that hardship for these folks, but they are still receiving the full benefit in a calendar year that the pension fund and benefits describe. You're doing your part. The date has just changed, and that's not to minimize that. That is an impact. But our recommendation in looking at it is that you did provide 3 months of notice ahead of time to give people a chance to adjust and modify for that. You made your decisions clearly, openly. There wasn't there should not have been too much surprise, but you know, we understand again the hardship of it. But if you're going to add a benefit, we want to be careful about how we do that and how that might affect other folks that are essentially a subgroup of our employee team that's going to help pay for it. And so that's just something else for us to consider as we walk through that. Ask Christine and Kevin if there's anything else, and then we'll be glad to take any questions or comments from there.
I'm going to just ask the board to go ahead and respond. If Kevin and Christine don't have anything, just start with Alderman Bransford.
For that summary, and sounds like you guys have met and talked quite a bit about this. Well, as of now, I'm inclined to, this course that we have taken is the one that I will continue to support. No one lost any money. I just want to make sure that 12 payments for the whole year will be given to these retirees. Correct. No one will lose a pay day.
Correct. That's correct.
It's the change of pay day. And I'm looking at this as if I was a recipient of this. As long as I'm getting each and every one of my monthly checks, it just, the timing changed, some late fees occurred, I'm assuming with some families. but however, you still got your same money. Otherwise, we would have to go into the fund and get money from others, other participants, to pay.
You're creating an additional obligation on the fund that we've got to fund somehow. Sure, but
I've been doing all this talking. I think everybody
We're
heard
not
me.
gonna
Yeah.
ask you to repeat.
All right. So the status quo, what we're doing, everyone is getting 12 checks for the year. Late payment, I'm sorry, I apologize from where I sit for any late payments that may have affected families, but still you're getting your same amount of monies.
Vice Mayor?
I think Pearl has pretty well covered most of the positions that I would cover on that. The one thing that I would say is that, so that there's no misunderstanding, the 40,000 that you referenced as payment by the actuarial to repay back into the retirement fund was at 20 years also.
right, that's
So
right.
it's 800,000. It's not 40,000. It's 800,000 over the time of the payment. So, and I would also point out a couple other things too. We make a $4.2 million contribution, the city does, to the retirement plan. Based upon the new actuarial studies that we had the other afternoon at the pension committee, that will go up approximately 10%, right? So we're going to add another 420,000 above the 4.2 million, correct?
I'm sorry, and that was based on the recommendations of the Experience study. The full actuarial study, based on where the investments ended 12/31/2018, has not been completed yet. So for what information that we do have now, there is about a 10% increase for
So
the
the
coming year.
minimum of the contribution is going up 420,000. We anticipate more than that. But I think, Pearl, I think you covered it well. I think that what we're doing here is no one's missing a payment. I believe, and I'm sorry that people that may have looked at something other and may have not necessarily understood or whatever, but I don't think there was anything, because we started back in March of last year with a pension committee meeting, Board of Mayor and Alderman workshops, the whole 9 yards to go through this. I think there was 2 notifications sent to the retirees on changing of this. We went back to our custodial bank and we did a 15-day adjustment to make sure that to eliminate as much of a hardship as we could. I won't go back and pull another $442,000 or whatever it is from the pension fund in order to fund a 13th payment, because basically, the 3 of you are paying that. Because you've been hired after 2010. That's your money.
Those two are.
Well, you, okay, all right, well, all right.
Your retirement.
I'll skip you, 2 of you then. As an example, after 2010, you have been paying into this. So the money we would be pulling is money that you have paid in without you receiving a benefit from what we're doing here.
If I may clarify, though, that the group that is paying into the closed plan are the retirees hired from 2010 through the end of 2016. Our retirees that were hired beginning in January of 17 going forward are paying their contribution into the TCRS plan. So I did want to just clarify that there's those employees hired in that 6-year window.
They're all paying in. The
Yes.
folks since January 1 of 17 are paying into TCRS. The folks between 2010 and the end of 2016 are paying in, but they're paying into what's called the closed City of Franklin plan.
Yes, sir.
Alderman Martin.
I would agree that I'm sorry if people were inconvenienced. That's always hard, a hiccup in the middle of a program, but it had to be. And because everybody's getting there, they're not missing a penny unless they've spent some of it before they got it. And so I would agree that I think we're okay.
Alderman Berger.
I just ditto the last 3 aldermen, and I just make sure that everyone is receiving all the pay that they were supposed to get. And when did we start the notices out to to the employees, to the retirees?
Letters went out in September of 18, and
Right.
then another mailing was sent in October. It's actually a refrigerator magnet that has all of the payment dates through the balance of 2018 and all the payment dates in 2019.
And during that time, did we hear from anyone?
I believe HR heard from a few folks. Kevin may be able to speak to that.
Yes, calls came in wanting to understand were they going to get the 12 checks for the year. And we told them yes, they would.
Okay.
Some people did tell us at that time that that's problematic, and we told them, well, hopefully with this much notice, you'll be able to change your ACA, your payments.
Payments, yeah. Because you can go in, like a house payment or something, you can request for a different date to be paid, or because those loans understand that usually, that those entities. All right, that's all my
Alderman
comments. Thank you.
Peterson.
First of all, to say that there's been no change in the payments to people because they're getting 12 payments in a particular calendar year and 12 other payments in the other calendar year. The thing is, though, that whenever you're whenever you're being paid for a calendar year, it is true that in 52 weeks you would expect to get 12 payments. However, if you start counting at the first payment that you get in the year, and you count 52 weeks from there, you've gotten 12 payments. On the 53rd week, you're expecting your next payment. That is not the case here. You go, after 52 weeks, you've gone to 56 weeks to get your very next payment there. And I mean, I'm just talking numbers. That is the way it is, the way this is set up. The other thing is, and I was happy that you talked about the 2010 persons who started to pay in. I don't know, in 2010, were we considering going to TCRS at that time?
We did explore that as one
But
of
at
our
that time, it
options,
but
but
it wouldn't have worked well,
there,
right?
yeah, there were some other complications.
Exactly.
And quite frankly, the approach that TCRS took with us when we explored it again in 2015, 16 was a little different. I can't give you all those details, but I can tell you it was much more, it made a lot more sense for us. It was more complicated in 2010, and it just was not a viable option for us at that time.
I thought I recalled that.
And more costly.
It was more costly.
Well,
it
wait.
just didn't make sense then.
Let's talk about cost then. As I understand it, by going to TCRS, we're saving how much money a year for fees and handling the plan?
Yeah, you're saving between $400,000 and $500,000. It's largely on how they manage the investments and the fees that are paid with those investments, and that's one of the reasons. It's a very well-managed fund, and then we also, because of being part of a larger fund, we could benefit from some efficiencies there. So that is a benefit that everybody's going to receive in terms of stretching the dollars that are in that fund, because it will be more cost-effective under their management.
I agree, and I think that was an excellent reason just in itself to go into TCRS. But my point is that in 1 year, you're saving more than enough money to give the extra payment that puts everybody back in so that they would be getting the number of payments and you would have expected to get had the old plan gone on. You would have continued to be paid at the same time of month. And again, I understand the change to a different time of month. I mean, I'm on the TCRS pension plan myself, and I know I get paid at the end of the month. But my point is, though, that whenever you're talking about paying an extra $440,000 and it's going to cost $40 a year for 20 years.
40,000.
40,000, excuse me. 40,000 a year for 20 years. In fact, you saved it back in the first year because you now are not having to pay the management and those fees there. So I really don't see how the people, even in the 2010 going into the closed plan, they're better off than they were before we went into this, and it really is costing them or the city or whoever less because we've gone into this and are saving $400,000 to $500,000 a year just because we're not having to pay the management and fees there. So my point is that if you look at the numbers, I mean, you know, and I mean, I may be a numbers person, but I'm certainly not an accountant. But looking at all those things, talking about how much it's going to cost to catch back up on that, we're catching it up in 1 year because we're not paying the fees and management costs that we were paying prior to this.
Alderman Speedy.
Thank you. I'll concur. I guess I'm to maintain the current approach, and I do think the City of Franklin and the Pension Committee takes very seriously having a very strong and healthy pension fund. I know one thing we've done right is we've reduced the assumed interest rate from 10 basis points every year, which is going to require additional funding from the city every year. You know, there's the front page article of Tennessean today, not apples to apples, but it's really bad when a pension fails and you've got to reduce benefits. So I think we're taking the proper steps now to make sure this is very strong financially now. And I think some of the fees maybe that Alderman Peterson is talking about are probably some soft dollar fees that are going to benefit the existing people in the pension and not just hard dollar fees that the City of Franklin is paying. So and I understand the hardship of the timing of the payments, but again, their W-2 is going to be the same for 2018 as it is 2019.
Alderman Blanton.
So I'm not a financial wizard, nor am I a mathematician. However, we did talk about this. We talked about it enough to push it through. I'm not on the pension committee for a reason. But what I will tell you is that looking at something on paper is totally different when you have past employees walk through that door as a group of people telling us that they feel wronged. I have a problem with that. And I've thought about this a lot since the last time we met. And I've been an alderman for 8 years. And I love our employees. It's something that's very important to me. And I think about if it were Joe York and if it was Paul or if it were Lisa and people that I've worked with for the last 8 years, I would fight for them because if they were feeling wronged, I would not want that to be the case. So I came up with an analogy that to me makes sense, that if you take my household and say my husband lost his job, which has happened before, sorry honey, and it took him 3 weeks to find another job. Then it took 2 more weeks for him to get that first paycheck. I'm going to be in a lot of hurt because it's going to take me a while to get caught up. And I'll never get caught up unless I get a really nice tax return or family gives me money or something. There is no catching up from that. And regardless of whether they're going to get 12 payments or not, they were shortchanged what they paid into as employees of the City of Franklin. We spend money prudently. I will give us that. And I think we're great stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. There's times where I feel like we probably threw a little study here, a little study there that collectively could maybe put a road in, but that's neither here nor there. I cannot support this. Once you bring the human side into this and we're dealing with people and not paper, I can't support this. I think that it will get caught up. And I don't know if there's another option of a number 4 where we give them another partial. I don't know what that is. But $400,000 to me is a drop in the bucket to honor these people and how they served our citizens and our community.
Alderman McClinton.
Well, this is clearly a scenario where people will correctly describe their position based upon whether they are the recipient or the payor. I don't think there's any question that we did it all correctly in the legal sense, in the process sense. We had the meetings, it was vetted, advice was given by our professionals and our staff, and ultimately we made a choice, admittedly among a number of imperfect choices. And that was just the unfortunate result of a rather arbitrary difference between we pay on the first and TCRS pays on the last day of the month. Yes, 12 payments is 12 payments. But I don't think there's any doubt that if you said, well, you're going to get all your money in 2019, you're going to get one big check on December 31st, 2019, that we would all have said, no, that's not okay. So the timing, if you take it to the illogical extreme, the timing most definitely matters. The timing of these checks matters. Would it have been different if we had given that notice in May? I don't know. We couldn't make the decision until we could make it. So I agree that we gave the notice that we could. I do think that 12 payments in 2018 and 12 payments in 2019 is the best we can do, because if we were to do some kind of make-up payment to the people who, to anyone who is not a recipient of that, quote, make-up payment, it's a windfall. It would properly, fairly be described as a windfall. If you are a taxpayer who might be hit with a fund balance contribution number that reflected this one-time make-up payment, you would correctly say it was a windfall. If you are another plan participant who does not get their, quote, fair share, then it looks like a windfall. And in fact, it is 13 payments in 12 months. So there's not a good answer here, because we're going to either leave good people who worked hard for the city to suffer the consequences of this timing anachronism, or we're going to allocate resources to create, from the payor standpoint, what amounts to a windfall. I have some concerns about treating different retirees differently. As I won't go into what's in the attorney memo, but there's some issue. Let me just say that there are some issues with, because it would be a plan amendment. Doing any kind of make-up payment or whatever would be a plan amendment, and that has legal ramifications that are, I'm not going to go into what's in the memo, but there's no doubt that that's a plan amendment, and that triggers some issues. So this is a conundrum. I wish there were an easy thing to do. And I would point out to Alderman Peterson's point that yes, there is a considerable savings. Mr. Speedy has pointed out that some of those may be soft costs versus hard costs. That doesn't make any difference to the people who had to go 45 days between paychecks. But those savings should benefit everyone in the plan and not one group of people in the plan. So there again, we would have a windfall problem, if you will. And when I say windfall, I don't mean to disparage the legitimate and fair complaint that people had to go 45 days between paychecks. That would be hard. That would be hard on almost any family, and certainly almost any family that is receiving retiree checks. So I'm sympathetic to that, but I'm also a pragmatist, and I will note that it appears to me that regardless of what I might do individually, there won't be the votes to do it. It's a tough thing, and you know, I don't know what we might have done differently had everyone been in the room at the time, because I would have had the same reservations about a windfall then as I do now. So I do think that it's a tough thing to deal with, and I've tried to be a champion for the employees for 22 years, and I wish that there were an obvious and easy answer here.
I have one retiree that wanted to speak to this issue, Mr. Reed. You're welcome to come up. We'll give you 2 minutes.
Okay, my name's Harry Reed. I'm retired captain with Franklin Fire Department for almost 30 years. I'm gonna have to disagree with most of you. The check that we were to receive on January the 1st, we got January the 31st. That put us a month late, and the most of us that retired from the city of Franklin are not millionaires and retired without a house payment, without other bills, extra money set aside for groceries. So that entire month, your retirees had to make it the best way they could. You're right that we're getting 12 checks. On paper, it looks right, but we're getting one the last day of December. Now you tell me how you're gonna pay those bills for all the month of December or any other month in this year when you get it the last day of the month. It's no way, and there's no way to catch up. A lot of people had to borrow money. It's hardship on the retirees that shouldn't be there. And if you choose to make a plan to save the city money, then you should look at who you're hurting. And if you look in this crowd, I'd like for them to stand up, the retirees that's here. Most of this crowd, and there's a lot of them that can't be here that are on other jobs, different things, health problems, but these are faces that you took a month's salary away from. It looks on paper, it's 12 checks. But reality, when it comes down to paying bills, and most all of us still have bills, we still have house payments, people have borrowed money to do this. And they're either gonna have to redo their home loans, do something, or try to catch up, borrow money from family members, whatever. And this is gonna go on. It will never catch up. It's a month late, and I understand the city doing something to save money, but it shouldn't be at the expense of the retirees.
Vice Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Eric, just chirping in just a little bit. This is not to save money necessarily. It is part of it. It is for the long-term future of the retirement plan. It is for every employee, whether they've retired or not retired. That's what this is. I mean, this is not, we could have stayed and managed the money and probably had the same 6% loss that we had with TCRS for the last quarter. This is for the long-term investment and the long-term security of the plan. It's fairly easy to go out and look at something and say that if we save money that somebody should have benefited from it, every pension employee, every employee benefited, we believe from the pension committee, benefited from this move and having TCRS manage the funds. And if we wanted to go into a history of it, there's no problem in me going into history of it. because I said there in 1992 or 3 or 4, when we moved the money from an insurance company back to the city to be managed. And if we want to go through that, that's fine with me, but not tonight.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 3, which is proposed revisions and updates to Franklin Forward, the City of Franklin Strategic Plan by Michael Walters Young. We would like to recognize that Michael's mother is here tonight.
Stand up. Stand up.
And
say hello, Mother.
And what I would add to that, not only does she coming to the meeting tonight, but she watches it regularly, but most commonly when her son is
Madam, may I
so-
recommend a hobby?
So noted.
Well, this is Franklin's longest-running reality show.
It's true.
I will say that. This is a follow-up to our strategic plan. The board adopted the Franklin Forward strategic plan back in 2013, and some of the key components to it are measures throughout that help us track our progress in achieving the strategic goals overall that were set out in that plan. One of the things we undertook was a review of that, and Michael helped lead that with our staff team, and we'll present to you tonight where that review took us and how that might modify some of the measures that are incorporated in that and better track our progress as we move forward. So, Michael, take it away.
Sir. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. My name is Michael Walters Young, your Budget and Strategic Innovation Manager and son of Michelle. We'll spend a few minutes tonight, in just a few minutes, going through the PowerPoint in your packets. There are 2 items in your packet. One is this PowerPoint. The second is a 10-page summary, goal by goal, baseline by baseline of recommended changes, which we're not going to go through, but they're available for you. We'll briefly touch on how we got to this point, our progress in the plan to date, the focus of this particular review, and then next steps. So briefly, just to remind you and the audience, city staff in conjunction with you all developed the strategic plan as the vision for the community for a 20-year horizon about 6 years ago. You formally adopted it 6 years ago. Staff began to integrate it into the budget document 5 years ago, or for fiscal 15. And in 2016, we launched our first open data website and a home for Franklin Forward, so you and anyone at any time, anywhere, could monitor how we were doing and progress on meeting those strategic plan goals. This is just a quick snapshot of the progress to date of where we are in certain goals. And for the vast majority, over 95% of the goals, we've got data, we've got baselines, we can plan how this works, and we can evaluate it in a proper manner. What we noticed, though, and why we asked your permission to adopt and to recreate what we called the theme teams, that would be Eric, one of the assistant city administrators for each theme, myself, and then a series of 4 to 5 department heads, was that some of the data and information that we originally guessed would work in 2013 either wasn't able to be found, or really wasn't good data, or there were measures that basically said, go join a group. Well, after you've joined the group, you're done measuring it. So it really wasn't something that you wanted to continue. So the recommendations that we make in this, and you'll see in the attachment, fall into one of 4 categories. Leave it as it is, modify it, delete it entirely, or create it new. The teams, when evaluating, used 4 metrics or measures, if you will, to evaluate each goal or baseline. Number 1, gauge the effectiveness and performance of each goal. Number 2, adjust any component to reflect current needs and demands. Number 3, modify or change any component which is proven not to be measurable. Or number 4, per your guidance and agreement, delete or add any goals. In summary, the review results. Number 1, none of the 4 themes or 15 sub-themes we are recommending to be changed. We find that they are as in and similar to the Constitution, very well-designed themes that can stand the test of time, at least for 6 years and hopefully for much longer. But, a safe, clean, livable city, quality of life experience, those are things that we all want to shoot for and continue. All of the changes we're recommending are technical in nature. That is, they primarily ensure that each goal is measurable, and that we can have a more effective measurement than we originally proposed. So you see on the slide, the summary, there's a net change. This was the mayor's main feedback when we reviewed this with you over a year ago. Try to eliminate what you can. And so we were able to eliminate 5 of the goals that form the underpinning of this plan. Keep in mind there were 64 goals and 74 baseline data points that we were measuring, so we can bring that down a little. 19 we want to keep as exactly as they are, 37 we want to modify, 13 we want to eliminate, and we want to add 8. So next steps. I'm giving you the presentation tonight and the proposed review plan. If you agree with these changes, and we can certainly come back at another work session, or we can have another time to discuss if you all wish to. We would revise the 2020 budget presentations for Eric's May submission to you all with these technical changes. If you recall, all of the strategic plan has been assimilated within 2 departmental budgets, and so we would change that. We've got the data to be able to modify those going backwards, so we can be able to show you slightly tweaked aspects of the strategic plan. We will then work over the spring and summer to update the Open Performance website, because we actually developed this presentation in winter. We're this close to spring, I feel. And then over the summer, what we'll do, one thing that we've never done for the city is actually develop a formal printed strategic plan. Several cities in Tennessee, especially Germantown, has one that we'd be able to have on our website, and you'd be able to show people to say, here in print is our 4th goals and our 15 sub-themes, and here's how we're doing. This is something that seems, it's amazing. We actually went forward and developed a data mining site, an open performance site, so you can see how we're doing, but I can't actually print it off for you easily and tell you. So we want to go back and do that. Mr. Mayor, that's our presentation.
Good presentation, and we know why your mother's proud of you.
Thank you, sir.
Alderman Peterson.
Well, first of all, you talked about going back in and working on the 2020 budget. Why are we having to revise it? I mean, I've forgotten how this ties in to the budget. I mean,
So in each budget, the detailed budgets that you review at Budget and Finance, and then you all get, you start with your mission statement, and then you have your goals, and then you have your performance measures. If there's an aspect of the strategic plan that a department is in charge of, if that gets changed, we would simply change that presentation and that data to reflect the changes that we're recommending here. We can get that done in time for the May submission. Again, they're rather technical in nature. The budget per se, number-wise, request-wise, no, that's not changing. Just the data behind the measures that we put in each departmental budget.
Well, in talking about those, some places I noticed that you had changed taking out, decreasing by 3% and stuff like that.
Right.
But on looking at the end one, I remember that we talked about Franklin government will seek diversification and efficiencies of revenue sources. When I was reading that again, in the specifics there, it says, create a climate for necessary taxes and fees and so on. But it says equitable balance, commercial, industrial, and residential tax base. We do have some industries, but that's nothing compared to the residential and commercial. So I don't, maybe we might want to say commercial, office, and something like that.
Residential and non-residential.
Yes,
perhaps,
maybe.
Maybe broader category.
Just something very, very similar to that, because I thought, back in the day, I can remember hearing Franklin described as a factory town. But that's not the case.
Not so much anymore.
That's right. Thank you.
We want to modify that one because the sort of way it's been implemented has been a goal of diversifying where the taxes come from.
Yeah.
And even with a property tax increase for the Invest Franklin initiative several years ago, that barely made a dent because we've had such healthy sales tax.
Exactly.
So to achieve a greater equilibrium there is virtually impossible.
And we are also bound and limited by what the state allows us to collect money for.
Sure.
You know, and the state of Tennessee is a lot more limited than other governments. Okay, thank you. But as I
Alderman
say,
Martin.
when I saw that industrial, I went,
Thank you. I want to talk about the goal modifications. On page 1, under BNS, the second box, baseline, the number of cases reported for property maintenance violations in 2012 was 179. Neighborhood resources and property maintenance. It says delete that number of cases do not show effectiveness. What does that mean?
What that means is that you can show the number of cases, but that is in no way able to necessarily demonstrate the effectiveness of the department and the response and the city's ability to control those violations. So it's data that is collected, but in terms of an overarching strategic plan, having the one that's immediately below it saying that the number of days it takes to respond and resolve a case and the percentage thereof being 21 days, that's a far more effective measure showing how we're able to respond. You could have one property that's got 30 violations in a year and it will stand as an outlier, and there's nothing necessarily that we can do about it.
Well, we can't do anything about it much anyway, as long as the property owner is allowing that to happen, because that has nothing to do with the fault of the city, because they do respond quickly. Now, I know this is 2012, but they do respond quickly. So, you know, are you just removing that?
We'd remove it because it's really just it's like you're counting things. They're not as much getting to the effectiveness of resolving them and improving
That's
the
good.
quality of a
That's good.
neighborhood. And we feel like these other measures maybe better help us do that, as opposed to just saying, how many cases did we open? How many cases did we resolve and how quickly is maybe a better way to look at it, and that's what that next measure tries to get at.
It's good to know how many calls there were, but also we know that was taken care of. So
Right.
that's good. Okay, thank you.
The only thing I might add is, you know, this year we got silver level lead certification. So I would suggest that may be a better measure of how we're doing as far as sustainability. You know, I notice you have the TVA Platinum level, which we've achieved, and we're certainly proud of that. But I think the lead is a better, better target.
We have been before the Sustainability Commission, and they've given comments and suggestions on how to change these measures as well.
Okay, we're ready to move on. We're going to item number 4, and great job, and we know your mother's proud. Item 4 is event permit for Main Street. Number 5 is liquor license renewal. 6 is liquor license renewal. 7 is valet parking for an event, which is a repeat event. Number 8 is consideration of ordinance 2018-43, an ordinance to rezone 22.07 acres from the detained residential R1 district to the specific developmental residential SDR 2.04 district for the property located north of South Carruthers Road and east of Carruthers Parkway, 4338 and 4340 South Carruthers Road, commonly called Carruthers Chase, establishing a public hearing for April 9th. It's a mouthful.
Long caption. And Mr. Mayor, item 9 is the development plan that goes along with that rezoning, so if we can discuss.
Sure, we'll
now.
discuss 8 and 9, which, good point.
Fantastic. So these items were previously presented before the Planning Commission back in November. Due to some public mailing, public notification issues, the board deferred it back on February 12th to the February Planning Commission meeting. Both items were considered and voted on 7-2 to recommend approval by the board. The Planning Commission also included in their motion an amendment.
Actually, quit taking them. But I'll continue to take them.
to require some additional screening between two proposed lots and the Falcon Creek subdivision. So that was another addition to this. I think the board's pretty familiar with this item. We've been here a couple times, so I'll entertain any questions if anybody has anything.
We're going to defer this on their request.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a lot of speaker cards, so I'm going to ask them. Just for future purposes, I don't like to take cards after we're into the meeting and you bring them up just when the item is here, because it creates a problem for me trying to manage the time of the meeting. So I'm going to have to cut each speaker to 1 minute. So we'll start out, so if you'll line up in the following order: Aaron Brown, Chris Kafkin Parsons, Gail Rowe, Bill Munson, Cindy Peden, Dan Horeka, and Andrew Friday, Kendra, you write like I do, and Charles Gaspateric. That was a mouthful.
Mr. Mayor, may I say, this is kind of starting from the beginning again, right? In other words, this is going to be first reading tonight. So in other words, all the times that we've already voted on it and everything,
Yeah, you're starting fresh.
Thank you.
And
Thank
you'll
you.
have a public hearing on April 9th, I believe it is, to line up with second reading and the only reading for the development plan. April 9th.
Mr. Mayor, before they start, I mean, the proper time for this would be at the public hearing, would it not? I mean.
Well, it's on the work session.
It's on the
and
work
when
session.
we bring things to
Well,
work session,
and I
that
have no
is
objections,
an
but
open
again,
time, but yes.
we're gonna go back over the same thing at public hearing in a month.
There will be public hearings for both the rezoning and the development plan on April 9th.
So may I just clarify that since the public hearing is what date again?
April 9th.
April 9th. So if you have 1 minute tonight and you don't feel like you can get everything in, April 9th, please come back at the public hearing.
Okay, Mr. Brown.
No, I'm Christopher Caffin Parsons. I think Mr. Brown had to go.
You got me fooled. Go ahead, please, sir.
I'm at 2301 Surrey Lane in Falcon Creek. We are very concerned about the blasting, which would be necessary in order to prepare the area for the cul-de-sac and the houses behind Surrey Lane and Upland Drive. It would be very close proximity to the existing established homes. We would like to know from the engineering point of view what kind of charges would be used and who would be monitoring the blasting throughout. It seems ironic that new home construction is inspected frequently to meet with codes. However, something as destructive as dynamite blasting, which could make a home structurally unsound, is not monitored and inspected with the same level of concern by the same panel. With reference to the proposed cul-de-sac, which we are adamantly against, this in no way fits in with the current trend of so-called connectivity. The houses in the cul-de-sac would be an island, disconnected from their own subdivision, and it appears not subject to our HOA rules. It does not make sense, and we would like to know if there is such a precedent in Franklin of a subdivision being so disconnected from itself, while not being under the governing authority of the subdivision through which they travel daily, and whose residents will be affected by their close proximity. We have already raised safety concerns for the many children who play in that area and need to walk to the swimming pool and cross roads to catch the bus. Once again, we have serious...
Go ahead and be finishing up, please, sir.
Once again, we have serious concerns about our subdivision becoming a through road and a shortcut for traffic, forever changing the quiet and safe neighborhood of Falcon Creek. Our roads are likely to suffer damage due to the heavy trucking and building vehicles which will be using them for the next 2 to 3 years. We thank you for your time and ask you that you please take all these issues and concerns into consideration before making a decision which has a propensity to change our subdivision forever. Thank you.
My name is Gail Rowe, and I live at 1052 Meandering Way. And I have a couple other questions, but my question to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen is, how can you discuss the current plans for this subdivision or the new subdivision and the 4 houses that go off of Upland when there are no specifics for those 4 houses that are going to be developed off of Upland Drive, which has no connectivity to the neighborhood of Carruthers Chase? There are no square footage plans or elevations, nothing. There is no plans in those. Of the other ones, there's plan sizes, you know, the houses will be 2,200 square foot to 3,000. Nothing on the paperwork, and nothing has been submitted since the 18th of January. And so my question is, how can you approve a plan or go forward with a plan when there's no specifications? Thank you.
Bill Munson, I thank you for my 1 minute. I really only have 3 points, and one of them is I was here listening to I also was not notified of the previous meetings, but the 2.04 acres that the Planning Department recommended to the Planning Commission represents 2 houses per acre. And if you look at the illustration of the development, virtually half of the 41 of the 45 home sites are represented on half the property, which really makes the density 3 or more houses per acre. So it's a lot more dense and up against an established neighborhood. The second point that I'd make is about the lack of specifics, but more importantly, that the cul-de-sac at the end of Upland Drive is only accessible through Falcon Creek, and that it be subject to the HOA within Falcon Creek, that it become part of Falcon Creek. And then thirdly, I've had foundation issues that have been reported in the Tennessean. I understand the concerns of those people who are concerned about blasting. So, thank you.
Hello, my name's Andrew Friday. I've had the pleasure of meeting with several of you, and thank you for your time. Basically, I just want to echo what everybody else is saying. This particular plan is lacking a lot of specifications. You know, I went through the Falcon City of Franklin website and looked at previous and current, and there's way more specifications on the tree sizes, shrubs, and I just want to bring to your attention, at the last Planning Commission meeting, which was last month, I requested that the Planning Commission amend the conditions for a buffer zone for lot 42 and 45, to which they did, to which I'd like you to please note that that's not on this plan. As a property owner, I would like to see what's actually going to happen on the plans. I think that should be something that should be updated fairly quickly, especially if now it's the work session and you all are reviewing it and it's not even on there. There's numerous things like that that constantly get brought up about this plan. And then the blasting. We have a development going in south of us, and then this potential development. The blasting, Falcon Creek would be getting hit potentially at the same time from 2 developments blasting, which could do some serious damage to our homes. So I just ask you to please consider the current property owners in this area. Thank you so much.
Good evening. I apologize for my voice this evening. Some of you are probably happy I don't have a voice tonight. You've heard my pleas in the past, and you know my couple issues. Envision Franklin says that Dan Horica, 505 Biltmore Court in Franklin. Thank you. Envision Franklin says that developments should be sized to be consistent with the existing lots of adjacent neighborhoods, and smaller lots should be located internally within the new development. In this case, the property I'm talking about, as you know, my property, 4 lots that are not consistent. and I'm asking for your help to hold them accountable. Coletta Park is on the other side of our subdivision, which you approved. They also came out with smaller lots initially. You all sent them back. They went to the drawing board, and the lots along what's adjacent to Cross Creek are now acre lots. It's not very many lots that would have to be changed, and I'm asking you for your support to hold them accountable to what we're asking for. The second thing is this walkway, that walkways should be put in new developments along lakes and rivers for the use of the people in the development. It doesn't say to put them in the backyards of the people that are having new homes and the existing homes. And so the only person that thinks that this walkway is a good idea is the person that wrote it. The walkway is going to be here, and it's going to be in the backyards of all those new homes. It's going to be in the backyard of us. We're going to be talking with everyone. They're going to be watching us light our grills, and that's really wasn't the idea of where to put walkways. So I ask for your support in holding them accountable to doing what's fair and right like Coletta Park did. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cindy Payton, 4348 South Carruthers Road. This is my first time to speak with you guys. I'm a little nervous here. But actually, I'm just basically, my same concerns are a lot of the same that Dan had. According to Envision Franklin, new growth calls for 50-foot barriers between lots. On this first lot, I have 5 acres. There are lots with less than an acre, 3 dwellings to an acre are surrounding me, all along my line. My second concern, again, Envision Franklin requires that new developments make their lots comparable to existing residents, and I have 5 acres, and that, you know, it's just. And my other point, and I just messed up. I said the thing twice. Again, I'm a little nervous. Envision Franklin calls for 50-foot barriers. There's no barrier between my lot and what's called for in the plan right there. I see a 5-foot walking trail. That's not, they're right in my backyard. And I have horses. That's a huge concern to me. Thank you for your time.
Kendra Correa, 1070 Meandering Way, Falcon Creek. I have concerns about the costs of Carruthers Chase for our Falcon Creek residents. One is the blasting. You'll be notified if you are within 300 feet of blasting, and you are will get a home inspection prior to blast, not post. A post-blast inspection will cost you $1,200 to start, that you then have to have both those inspections to submit damage to your insurance company. At 301 feet, those costs are your own. At $1,200 per inspection, each of those is the cost of a mortgage payment for most Falcon Creek residents. Big concerns, we've already had damage from Lockwood Glen, and you'll be hearing from one of the homeowners this evening. Secondly, landscape plans. The fence is not called out on there. I realize it's the developer's prerogative of what he wants to do and what happens during grading. But as a Falcon Creek resident, isn't it gonna cost me $600 to replace a fence that's there now to corral my kids and my dog or whatever? Some of the pilots, it could cost up to $1,000 to put in a fence. And lastly, on the landscape plans, there's lots of nice little circles, but we don't know if they're knee-high plants or if they're trees. And I was looking at Nichols Bend, and it's beautifully called out about how many are gonna be there, what size they're gonna be, and it's just kind of a random bunch of circles on here. Do we have to plant trees for privacy? Do we have to plant buffers? I'd really like to see somebody spend some time on the landscape plans, as well as we called out on Upland Court, we don't see that revision that was made by the planning department. Thank you.
Charles Gaspoderic, 1024 Meandering Way in Falcon Creek. I went through this blasting issue with the previous builders back behind me, and they are still blasting back there to this date. It's not quite so bad now because they're only breaking up little bitty pieces, but when they did do the blasting, I was told that they should well, for that whole addition, they've been blasting back there for a couple, 3 years now. And I have significant damage to my house. I checked with the fire marshal to see if I could find out why I had so much damage when they had sensors out there that said that the blasting didn't hurt anything. Well, they put the sensors at Old Carruthers and New Carruthers, the corner there. I live all the way halfway down Old Carruthers, and they were blasting on the same piece of rock that my house sets on. At one point, I was sitting there in my house, and the blasting went off. It knocked stuff off of the shelf above my TV set, and it shook that house so bad that I thought it was an earthquake, because I didn't really hear the blast. But it shook the whole house. And if they're gonna blast behind these existing houses, you're gonna have, you know, and to make the homeowners pay for the blasting checks is ridiculous, because they're doing the blasting. We are not wanting it. Thank you.
Did Mr. Brown ever come back? Okay. Okay, board, what kind of questions do you have or comments? Alderman Peterson.
One thing that I had not noticed before is that there's a that part that you see the trail on. That's actually a slope of 14 to 20 feet percent slope. So are they going to leave it that high, or are they going to blast it down, or what?
We haven't received any grading plans at this point. Those would come in with the site plan submittal. We don't have a full grading plan at this point. Those would come in at the site submittal stage, or site plan submittal stage.
Well, it looks like it's just right at the part where the trail loops. Oh, in fact, that whole thing. If you look at it, you see the little piece that's open where it doesn't have a house, lots on it. It looks to me on the, let's see, now I think I'm looking at the development plan, so it might be, let me see, it's the second page of the development plan. It looks like it matches just what's left there.
Is the applicant?
Could we? This is about the. Is this the fifth page? No, this is the fourth page, but I'm looking back at the second page there, and that
Go ahead.
part.
I'm Michael Dewey with
Sure.
Dewey Engineering. Sorry, I'm Michael Dewey with Dewey Engineering. There is a grading and drainage plan that was reviewed by staff's engineering department, and the area in the open space behind, which is the open space is called Lot 47. That trail is to kind of is a natural trail that will go under the existing vegetation that's there. Yes, ma'am. Right. It's not a ADA trail. It's just a natural hiking trail. Oh, and just to clarify, this open space, the 50-foot buffer the intent is to meet Envision Franklin, and the with Coletta Park there is no open space behind Coletta Park between Cross Creek. Those lots abut Cross Creek. So the buffer is there for incompatible lot sizes, is what it's intended for Envision Franklin.
And just to follow up on that, and then I'll let some other people talk. You know, I think when the presentation was made, it says that the lot sizes were comparable to the lot sizes adjacent to it.
They're comparable to the city, the lots
exactly
within the city.
In the city.
Yes.
And you know, talking about the previous project you were discussing there was a great deal of discussion about what do you do whenever they are there are county lots that are 1 acre or more, and there were some other things done, as already mentioned, but there's really not any comparison between the lots next to this on the south side.
And that's why Envision Franklin establishes that incompatible lot size buffer. So where there's acre lots and then there's 6,000 square foot lots, there's a buffer to help with that situation that you're talking about.
Well, to be very honest, 50 feet's not very much whenever you're talking about that. And also, I will follow up one thing on the landscaping. What's it supposed to be in there?
The landscape plan, a full landscape plan would be submitted at the site plan stage. So we will know caliper trees and that sort of stuff as time goes on. Now there are some that are listed in there, but we'll get a more robust idea of it with the site plan stage.
Alderman Speedy.
First two questions, you can see about the biggest concerns, obviously, from the homeowners, blasting. I made a comment that, we've been told that maybe like a pre-blast survey that the developer, builder would pay for 300, 500 feet, and then even maybe explain the post-blast survey process. We've heard a lot that Lockwood Glen has done damage, but that's just what we've heard. We don't have any hard evidence, I guess, so maybe talk to that. And tied into that, I guess, the second big concern, obviously, cul-de-sac at the top, the fear that there could be some massive blasting up there in 10,000 square foot homes. There's maybe some specs that you could give the homeowners there, because obviously these are more, few homes that are talking 30 or above 2,000 square feet. Most of 1,500 to 2,000. And the issue too, it is a little odd, the only way they can get there is Falcon Creek, because there's maybe been some discussion, it sounds like they would be amenable to having those four homes maybe be in the Falcon Creek HOA, so that those kids could walk that swimming pool, those two issues.
Yep. No, that's the second is a very valid point, and we looked at trying to take a drive across the stream, but with these natural features, I mean, this is a environmental feature of the site, and we're trying to limit the disturbance to this. I mean, this stream continues on and runs through Falcon Creek. It's just not, there's no buffer on it. So this road, Upland Drive, was stubbed to the subject property, and our goal was to terminate that right away and finish the product and finish the right of way for this instead of it extending across, which it would seem difficult to do, to extend across Cross Creek. As far as the blasting goes, there are state requirements that contractors have to follow for that. I'm not privy to all of the laws and regulations for that, but that's something that maybe we could get our contractor here at the public hearing and answer some of those questions.
And maybe again, just maybe the size of the homes, it is a little bit elevated, so the fear is they've got these huge homes that are looking down on maybe Falcon Creek. I mean, staff always talks about transitioning, landscape buffering transition, but maybe size transitioning on the size of the homes.
Yes, and as you guys have pointed out, there's quite a bit of topo on this site, and so these plans were submitted first of all, they were submitted or met with staff in November of 2017, and plans were developed through the spring of 2018 and submitted in the spring of 2018. And we worked with staff these are detailed grading plans to discuss how these lots will be graded. The likelihood of that area in the Upland Drive being blasted, it's a relatively small area of disturbance. So my guess is that they would hammer rock back there. I'm not, I can't guarantee that, but that would be my guess, is that they would hammer, it would be the most most economical for them, I believe. Because of the size of the disturbance back there. And so that's, as far as blasting goes in the rear, that's what that's all I can, most likely it would be hammered in the back.
But I guess as part of the PUD, is that something the city can kind of mandate? These are going to be no bigger than 3,000, 5,000, 7,000 square foot homes, or we're just kind of at the mercy of the developer once the PUD gets approved?
There is typical elevations in the plan, but we can take a look at that a little.
Are you?
Just a comment on the size of the homes.
Push your button, please.
It's actually still on. We normally do not get into square footages of homes, but rather maybe the height can be more regulated. But typically, we do not evaluate square footages of homes during review at development plan or site plan for multiple reasons. And I also wanted to point out just one other thing. I think we haven't mentioned it, but the Planning Commission did recommend that a condition be added to the development plan, that landscape buffer be added between those 4 lots off of Upland and the Falcon Creek subdivision. We don't have a dimension for that. They just said enough to make sure that the screening, the vegetation could go in there. But normally we really don't get into the square footage part of it for a lot of different reasons. We do look at elevations, but with development plan, those are typical, and they are not actually approved until the site plan and along with building permits. So there's often a lot of changes that happen between if you were shown something at development plan. It's not always consistent with what actually gets built because there are so many changes between different builders might come in. There can be a lot of different things once the contractor actually gets out there too and realizes the topo and some of those things.
Alderman Bransford.
Just a couple of comments about that the through traffic or the heavy trucks coming into the residential area to get to the site.
So this was discussed at Planning Commission too. There really is no other access for those 4 lots on the cul-de-sac, but every other home or lot that's proposed would take access through construction entrance off South Carruthers Road. And I know that the applicant and then both staff and the Planning Commission made those comments, and we would look at that at site plan stage. So I mean, we would not advocate heavy trucks coming through for excavation and whatnot through Falcon Creek. And they're also required to post bonds for maintenance of streets, so our streets department would go out and look at those to make sure if there was damage that it would be fixed appropriately.
Okay. I'm also concerned about the blasting as well, those comments, and more specifics on the landscaping. So I will be looking forward to hearing more about those.
Alderman Martin. Is your button push?
Michael, I'm not only concerned about the blasting, I'm horrified about the blasting, because I don't care if it's a 10,000 square foot home or a 17 square foot home, 17,000 square foot home, excuse me. Those people have a right to have their homes without having damage. And wherever there's blasting, there's going to be damage somewhere. And to say 300 feet, now that may be a state thing, 300 feet, but I'm saying that for the city of Franklin, we need to go beyond that. And if it's 500 feet away and there's damage, that needs to be attended to. And I would like for us to look into that and see what we can do about that, because that is just unacceptable. And to just nod our heads and say, oh, well, it was just 300 feet. No, that won't get it. That's not what Franklin is. We are better than that. Another thing is the landscaping. Now, I was not at the Planning Commission meeting when you decided to put the 50 foot of, no, it wasn't 50. It was 5 feet of landscaping. 5 feet. It needs to be 50. It needs to be 50, and it needs to be evergreen trees. Those leaves are going to come off in the wintertime. It needs to be protected. These people that have their homes, their lives already planned, they have a right. I don't care if they're in the county or if they're in Marshall County, or I don't care where they are. They have a right to not have their homes destroyed and their ways of life. And so I'm going to ask you, I'm not on the planning commission, but I'm going to ask you to look into that, to look into cherry laurels and beautiful shrubs that you can screen these places that don't want you there. They don't want you there. And they don't want anything there. But this is one of those donut holes, and it's a mess, but we got to get through it. And so I'm going to ask you to take care of it with landscaping, and even if you have to take that trail out, if it's bothering the neighbors, either put it somewhere else or take it out. Let them walk in the street.
Yes, ma'am. The trail, if that needs to go away and staff planning is okay with it, we are happy to remove that trail.
So in terms of that note, we don't require a trail by zoning ordinance, but that has been designated as a space to meet formal open space requirements. So if the applicant cannot make it a formal open space, they would need to place that open space elsewhere on site, which may mean rearranging lots. So there might need to be some redesign, and that's okay if that's what needs to happen, but just so everybody at the table, including the applicant, understands that part.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Any other, Vice Mayor?
Let me make sure I understand. If the trail is moved, the trail goes away, they basically have to come back with another plan.
They can redesign the open space to have other amenities, but it has to be a formal open space, so it has to have some type of gathering place in it, which I don't think meets the intent of what I'm hearing, is to not have people in the formal open space. So they would need to move that to a different place and have it really truly act as a formal open space if that's the desire.
Quick comment, and then we're going to move on.
Thank you. Do I understand that there's supposed to be, because of incompatibility, there's supposed to be a 50-foot buffer? What about those two lots 35 and 36? Are they 50 feet away from the, I mean, I'm looking at your scale up there, and that certainly doesn't look like 50 feet. It'll be on, it's not on that page, it's on page number 4, if we can look at that. Page number 4.
Christina, about that part. So generally when there is a large tract of land over, 5 acres or so, we generally look at that as a potential for future development rather than an existing lot that will not be subdivided in the future. We could definitely go back and look at that, but typically we do not apply the buffer in those instances because it's looked at as an undeveloped piece of property versus a lot in a subdivision.
Well, it's definitely not 50 feet there.
No, it's
not at all.
It's not, but that's what met the staff requirements going through the process for starting in April of last year.
And just to, comment on this particular development, in terms of getting stuck between Envision Franklin recommendations and the zoning ordinance, there have been a lot of conflicts. And so staff has had to try to adapt between the different two documents, but also it is a very narrow piece of property that has city subdivision, I think R3 zoning on one side with very large county lots on the other. There is almost no way to make a transition that basically to have compatible lots on both sides of the property line because of the narrowness of this property. So I understand that our application of the zoning ordinance and Envision Franklin may not be as consistent with what we've done in the past, but this property is unique in that respect.
Well, and also we mentioned a little bit earlier having that creek there. Really, it is an extremely difficult piece of property to develop, but I don't know that that means that anything goes.
Sure.
Vice Mayor, you wanted to make a
One
comment?
more comment. I want to comment in this matter. What I want is what Envision Franklin zoning ordinance, staff, whatever, okay? It's not what I want. I am not the Planning Commission. I am not Envision Franklin. I am not something else. I want to know what meets the requirements, and when you bring them to us, that's what I'm gonna look at, and that's what I'm gonna vote on, okay? So I want to make sure that you don't go away thinking that there needs to be 50 feet of evergreens and there needs to be 100 feet of something else. Meet the plans and meet what we've got. That's when we put these rules and guidelines in place so that everyone knows when they come here what kind of playing field that they have to play on and what the rules are. And it's not something that we change on the fly up here.
We're going to move on, but I'm going to make a comment, and that is, I think you've heard a lot of comments from the citizens, and you've heard some concerns, and I know you've heard the alderman, and particularly Alderman Marketing, talking about the blasting, and I would expect that all of these questions need some answer for the board to understand. Seemed like to me there's still a lot of mystery about it. I know it's a difficult parcel, but you chose to, somebody's chosen to develop it, and they've chosen you to design it, and so maybe we can come up with some answers.
Yes, sir.
Item 10, consideration resolution awarding the construction contract for the Jim Warren City Tennis Court Repair Project to Tennessee Valley Paving for $779,321. Any question? Next is on an interlocal agreement with Williamson County and the City of Brentwood for mutual aid related to vehicle burglaries. Everybody good with that? Item number 12 has been requested to be deferred to April 23rd, 2019 work session. Item number 13 is Resolution 2017-73, a resolution to amend the Franklin Police Department Record Service Policy and Agreement. Any questions about that one? Alderman Peterson.
Just one thing, I don't know anything about this, but I've just been reading about, and I don't know whether these are records or maybe vehicles that are impounded, but do the people that are owners know at all times where their vehicle is? Because, as I say, I've heard.
Debbie's not here. They should. And we use we cycle through different vendors that provide that service for us. I believe JP's here. That's good.
Okay.
So I believe that's part of what we communicate to folks.
Yes, anytime a vehicle is towed in the city of Franklin, our CAD.
Oh,
it's on.
Bring it too close then.
Okay. Anytime a vehicle is towed in the city of Franklin by the city of Franklin, it's documented in our CAD system. So anytime that anybody calls in wanting to know where their vehicle is, we can just contact dispatch and they'll let us know exactly
But I mean,
which tow lot
excuse
towed
me,
it.
but how do they know to contact you? That's what I'm saying.
Normally, a lot of times we'll get it as they think their car has been stolen
Well,
because
see.
it's missing, and then they'll contact us, and then the first thing we'll do is review our CAD to find out if the vehicle has been towed by us, or if we need to go ahead and take a report for that. And then once we determine that we've towed it, we'll be able to get the tow information because the record services are on a rotation with our department.
Well, as I say, I've just been reading very recently about people who said they couldn't find their car for a week. Not from Franklin.
No, and that might be Metro.
That should not happen because of the type of tracking we do.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
Right. And this policy is how we go through that rotation, and most importantly, how we can suspend wrecker and towing companies whenever they don't respond.
Everybody good to move on? We're going to go to item number 14, which is a contract with Bass Berry Sims for outside legal counsel services, review and drafting contract forms. Everybody good with that?
My question would be, I mean, do we know how many billable hours to expect? I mean, at $4.75 an hour, is this some very specialized work, or do we need to have another full-time attorney on staff? I mean, couple of hundred hours, and boom, that's real dollars.
Right. And the purpose of this agreement is for them to help us draft standard documents, contract documents that we would create as like a PDF and use going forward for all of our construction agreements. We've kind of piecemealed them over time. And while I know the fees do sound high, the benefit of using Warren Hughes and Brian Dobbs is that they litigate exclusively construction contracts. So they know and mostly for government entities. So they know the problems that we will get into. They're helping us right now with our litigation regarding Haley, Hobos, and SSR on contracts. He's been our mediator a few times, Warren has, and so they understand the pitfalls that we can find ourselves in.
And I can tell you from experience, a well-crafted construction contract pays for itself many times over. I've seen them both ends of that spectrum, and we want to upgrade and update what we've got as standard. Yeah, I don't know if we know how many hours. That's a great question. I don't know if you have any sense of that. We'll use it as we need it.
They know they're working for a government entity, and they're watching it for us.
Okay, we're going to put items 15 and 16 on the next Board of Mayor and Alderman work session. So we're adjourned for 15 minutes, and we'll take up the Board of Mayor and Alderman.